Hey everyone, welcome back. This is the forms video for Paradise Lost, where we're going to take a look at some of the different genres and kind of forms of construction that Milton uses to put together his words and storyline. I wanted to start this video by turning to the literal source for Milton's narrative in Paradise Lost, which is, of course, the fall of humankind in Genesis, in the Bible. I'm including the passage here so we can quickly read through it. You'll notice that it's really short. Milton's Paradise Lost starts with 10 books. He later revises it to make it 12 books. So it's a significant amount of words. It's a lot of ink. And I want us to just be aware that, the source he's working from essentially is, by comparison, incredibly brief. So in this passage, we can see that this is what we're working with. Now, the serpent was more crafty than any other wild animal that the Lord God had made. He said to the woman, "Did God say you shall not eat from any tree in the garden?" The woman said to the serpent, "We may eat of the fruit of the trees in the garden, but God said, you shall not eat of the fruit of the tree that is in the middle of the garden, nor shall you touch it, or you shall die." But the serpent said to the woman, "You will not die, for God knows that when you eat of it, your eyes will be opened, and you will be like God, knowing good and evil." So when the woman saw that the tree was good for food, and that it was a delight to the eyes, and that the tree was to be desired to make one wise, she took of its fruit and ate. And she also gave some to her husband who was with her, and he ate. Then the eyes of both were opened, and they knew that they were naked, and they sewed fig leaves together and made loincloths for themselves. Okay, that's it. That's really minimal. And the other reason I want to draw our attention to this source passage is because the story of Adam and Eve and the eating of the fruit gets told a lot throughout time and history. And sometimes we impute things onto that story that aren't clearly there. Like there's a long history of clearly faulting Eve, for being the person who eats the fruit. It's a little bit more ambiguous when you read this passage to what extent Eve is like really the bad actor here. It says that her husband is with her. I mean, this is just one example to say that a lot of assumptions get placed on this passage. But we want to make sure to go back to the source to see what's really there in the Bible, and then to see how Milton does something with it. Before we move forward, I just want to note that we can call this kind of form cosmogony, a theory or narrative of the origin of the universe. So that's one of the forms that Milton is participating in Paradise Lost, is the genre of cosmogony, telling the story of how the universe began, or how humankind began. All right, other genres that Milton is using in Paradise Lost. The first is epic. We are familiar with epic. We know it especially through Beowulf, but I think we can see elements of epic in some of the medieval romances that we read as well, with Sir Gawain and the Green Knight, or even Milan and Landval in particular. But Milton does something really interesting in Paradise Lost. He's using the epic form, and we know that in epics, we usually sympathize with the epic hero. That's usually where we invest our emotional energy, sympathizing with the epic hero. In Paradise Lost, he makes the bold decision to make Satan the epic hero, the bad guy. Suddenly, the bad guy is the person we're supposed to be rooting for. So, in an epic, we have an epic hero, Satan, who is facing a difficult quest. Satan's quest is to get revenge on God for throwing him out of heaven and all of his compatriots out of heaven. It usually involves a journey. He takes a journey from hell to earth, to lead to that whole scene of the fall of humankind, and it involves a formidable opponent, again, that being God. So Milton's deployment of epic is really interesting because we are placed on the side of Satan, and God is suddenly in this position of being a villain, at least from Satan's point of view. So there's an interesting kind of narrative tension there in this work, where we, again, are placed in a position that we normally wouldn't place ourselves, or at least Milton's readers in the 17th century normally wouldn't place themselves. Another genre that's present in this multi-generic work, meaning there are many genres in Paradise Lost, is that of tragedy. So while Satan is our epic hero, whom we're intended to sympathize with, The story of Adam and Eve in the garden conforms to something much more like tragedy. Now, we haven't read any tragedies in this class, but I think that you are probably familiar with the genre to some degree. Usually in tragedies, especially from this time period and before, feature some kind of hero or heroine of great stature, someone who is kind of high and mighty or, exists on a pedestal. And Adam and Eve, being like the first humans, kind of fit that bill here. And the hero commits a tragic error or tragic miscalculation. Here we could say, that tragic error is choosing to listen to Satan and to eat from the tree of knowledge. And this tragic error leads to the devastating downfall of the protagonist. Of course, we can see that with the fall of humankind and the introduction of sin into the world, etc. So Milton is conforming this story of Adam and Eve to this kind of classical genre of tragedy. Now, one other element of form that I want to discuss is smaller than genre, and it has to do with Milton's sentences. And really, I'm just here to say Milton's sentences are long and they are really complex. So it will take you a bit to get used to them, which is one of the reasons I really encourage you to listen to the audio versions this week, because it will help you to disentangle these long sentences. So I'm going to read this very first sentence in Paradise Lost. It's the very first one, book 1, line 1. And we'll kind of work through it together here. Okay. Of man's first disobedience and the fruit of that forbidden tree, whose mortal taste brought death into the world and all our woe, with loss of Eden, till one greater man restore us and regain the blissful seat, sing, heavenly muse, that on the secret top of Oreb or of Sinai didst inspire that shepherd who first taught the chosen seed, in the beginning, how the heavens and earth rose out of chaos. Or if Sion hill delight thee more, and Siloa's brook that flowed fast by the oracle of God, I thence invoke thy aid to my adventurous song, that with no middle flight intends to soar above the Aeonian mount, while it pursues things unattempted yet in prose or rhyme. Okay, so first 16 lines of Paradise Lost is a 16-line sentence. There are no breaks. There's no way you could say that without taking a breath. It's really long. And it takes some, again, detangling. I'm not even sure what the word is right now. You know what I mean. So the one thing I want to point out here is that we have this kind of disrupted syntax in which the main verb and the main object of the verb are separate from one another. We find this in a lot of poetry. They kind of rearrange sentences in slightly confusing ways for we modern readers. So I want to show us how this is really the main imperative of the sentence. Sing, heavenly muse. It's an invocation of the muses. That's how a lot of epics begin. Inspire me so that I can tell this story. So this is really the main verb, the main imperative of the sentence. Sing, heavenly muse. I want you to sing. Sing about what? Then we go back to the beginning of the sentence. I want you to sing about man's first disobedience and the fruit of that forbidden tree, whose mortal taste brought death into the world and all our woe, with loss of Eden, till one greater man restore us and regain the blissful seat. So that's really key to kind of detangling, here we go again, the beginning of this sentence. And then from there, it just keeps going on, kind of adding more and more details. That on the secret top of Oreb or of Sinai didst inspire the shepherd who first taught the chosen seed, in the beginning how the heavens and earth rose out of chaos. And then Milton kind of cheats here to keep the sentence going. He uses a colon and then starts kind of again. Or if Sion hill delight thee more, and Siloa's brook that flowed fast by the oracle of God, I thence invoke thy aid to my adventurous song. So again, he's saying, or if you prefer this, I'm still invoking your aid, muse, to help me tell this story. Okay, so that's just my little tutorial for Milton's sentences. Again, truly the best thing you can do is to read along and listen to an audio version to help you make sense of these. And I promise it'll get better, especially in books 2 and 9, where he's actively telling the story. We often find poets engage in really dense, complex language when they're starting off their story to kind of be really impressive. I mean, we have Milton claiming here in his final line that his story is pursuing things unattempted. Move my mouth. It's pursuing things unattempted yet in prose or rhyme. So this is Milton saying, I'm trying things that are huge, things that no one else has tried. And his complex language is kind of mirroring that grand ambition of his. But in books 2 and 9, because the story is already going, I think you'll kind of wade into that a little bit more easily. Okay, stopping this form video here. I'll meet you over at the context video.